can see massive crystals in the kidneys already.
Subsequent increases in inflammation and whatnot.
Oh yeah, so it has the main thing I was looking at in my paper was the kind of the progression of the ability to clear out those crystals, because you have this like tubule widening that occurs, and we were kind of that's what I was studying specifically was that how do the kidneys deal with these crystals normally, and so they kind of clog up the tubule, and then the tubules dilate, and then they clear out the crystals, and then they go back to their normal shape. So that's kind of like a progression over a week that occurs, but it happens very rapidly that they're all there. So if the concentration is sufficient, they'll crystallize quickly.
Now, if someone were to be listening to you for the first time, they say, okay, well, this guy's probably carnivore. He doesn't eat vegetables, but vegetables have oxalates. But I asked you that question offline, and you said you do eat vegetables.
Yeah.
I mean, what in terms of oxalates, like what do you have instead of spinach? If you're trying to reduce that, like what kind of vegetables do you consume?
So I like arugula. That's like kind of like one of my go-tos. Cruciferous vegetables. So I like kale. I think the dino kale is supposed to be lower in oxalate than the curly kale. I have no way to verify that, but that's what I've heard. And then I like Brussels sprouts and broccoli. Even though broccoli is on the higher side, I think it just as long as you're avoiding overall getting too many your oxalate load for like a day, as long as you're not surpassing that, then you're probably going to be okay. Like, we have to deal with oxalate. Like, there's no way around it. Even normal metabolism, you produce oxalate. Like, there's no way to stop it. It's just how much are you getting exposed to in any one day.
Yeah, I think we have this misconception that we, on both sides, where we need to avoid oxalates. I mean, that's like trying to avoid pollution. Like, it's just not going to happen. Like, It's just everywhere. But then you have the other side that's, okay, like, yeah, maybe, like, we are consuming too much. You can consume too much in the way of spinach. I mean, why would you want to accelerate something? If we're dealing with it, we know it's problematic. Trying to get rid of it entirely is a moot point. That's just not going to happen. But there are clearly things that you could reduce consumption of that would slow that sort of acceleration. But you mentioned something before that was really interesting. So it's almost as though we've evolved to deal with oxalate. Mm-hmm. Even down to a microbiome level, but things have sort of changed. I mean, what's different today? Like, why would you say we're probably less efficient at dealing with oxalate today than we would have been maybe 100 years ago?
I would think so, yeah. I think that so there's a bacterium that is, it's Oxalobacter formigenes is the one that I'm thinking of right now. That's, a primary consumer of oxalate. And most people do not have that bacteria. Like, it's just missing from their microbiome. If you have it, then it's going to eat up a lot of the oxalate, and you don't have to worry about having too much of it absorbed.
Until you go on a round of antibiotics.
Right, yeah. Well, yeah. And everybody's been kind of, on antibiotics, or the soil is just polluted and there's no way to get these bacteria back because they've been killed in some way. So there are, I think, research efforts to try to, like, turn these into, like, tools like that you could repopulate, maybe probiotic type stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's that people are trying to do that.
Also to synthetically make a bacteria or something.
Or just find the one that is in nature and turn it into a encapsulated form. I think that's a research effort.
It's really interesting. I mean, when you look at the world of probiotic research, a lot of people think, I've looked at this a lot, a lot of people would think that probiotic research is just the same strains. There's a lot of really, really interesting research coming out in the world of not just the microbiome, but actually in how we can, because the literature on exogenously adding probiotics in is pretty strong. Mm-hmm. Where I'm curious is, okay, if oxalates are one of these things that we're just consistently consuming, what's the difference between those and another, say, anti-nutrient? I always had this thought process that maybe you develop a little bit of a hormetic effect. You kind of like almost get stronger and more resilient at dealing with them. Is that not the case? It's almost like there's no way to deal with them. They just build up.
I think that the problem with oxalate is that it's we have no way of breaking it down. Like, there's no mechanism for the breakdown of oxalate. So once it's there, you kind of have to figure out how to get rid of, like, shuttle it out. And I think that's the issue with it. So, like, other hormetic stresses, they might be toxic, but they're breakdownable. Like, you might have a way of doing some sort of second pass metabolism. They get either pooped out or something. But oxalate's trickier. You gotta figure out how to get it through the kidney without causing an injury. I think that's a tricky part.
What are some ways? I mean, are there some ways that you can combine, or some that you can combine with higher oxalate foods? Let's say you're you know, going to grandma's house for dinner and she made something with spinach, and you don't want to be a total jerk. You know, like okay, I don't want to have this thing. Like, hopefully people aren't going to be that crazy about it. But is there something that you can kind of consume alongside it?
Yeah, calcium-rich foods are good if you're gonna have oxalate. Putting calcium with it, like I think you look at like Indian food, they make that like a spinach dish, but it's like got cream in it, so they already like naturally figured out a way to like eat a lot of spinach without having. I don't know if they did it on purpose, but it works out the same way.
Do Indian people have good kidney health?
I don't know. I don't think they have a lot of diabetes. India has very high diabetes, but for other reasons, I think, besides the paneer they're eating.
That's true. I do know that I think Indians have some of the best colon health. From spices and stuff. Some of the best. And the fastest, this is a random fact, that's the fastest motility by all the spicy food. And
they've high gut motility. Interesting.
And so it's that, and it was some regions of Africa, but the interesting thing is with Africa, they didn't necessarily like isolate for like foodborne illness and stuff as well, which like would definitely increase transit time or decrease transit time. So anyway, that's
I'm fascinated by that topic as well.
So consuming calcium. And then you mentioned before, we talked on another video about citrate.
Yeah, so we have a product, Santa Barbara Nutrients, a company we founded specifically for polycystic kidney disease, for kidney health, that we have a product that has calcium in it for that very reason, to hopefully bind excess oxalate so it doesn't get absorbed. So we have a citrate and BHB with calcium, magnesium, and potassium, and the calcium in there, specifically designed to bind up, oxalates and phosphates and whatnot.
Nice. Yeah, I'll link down for that below. It's pretty nice, pretty cool product. So I want to pivot over to AGEs for a second. And again, I know it's not something you've done in your lab specifically, but you're very well spoken on it and make a lot of sense with it. Is there a relationship at all between kidney health and advanced application end products? And what are advanced application end products, just so people have a solid understanding? Because I think people think that I know people think, because I see it on Instagram all the time, that if they eat a sweet potato with some ground beef, that it's automatically glycated and it's going to be a problem. And I know that's not necessarily the case. Like, how does it all work?
Yeah, so there's a few things. So advanced application end products are the addition of carbohydrate onto proteins, and there's a few different ways that this can happen. So you have like a non-enzymatic version of that. So that's the one that I think is the primary concern, where you actually have just abundant glucose, and this is, I'm talking about in the blood in particular. So if you have very high glucose over long periods of time, that will just by virtue of the abundance of glucose, will cause its addition to proteins. And then that changes the protein structure, because proteins are designed to have many different sugar molecules on them. So, I think it's hard to conceptualize if you don't know about this, but every cell has this thing called the glycocalyx, and the cell is just this. It has all these proteins protruding out of it, and then you have on each one of those proteins, you have all these branched sugar molecules all over it. And those are very important, the orientation of them, like how they are, like how they're linked, which sugars are on there. They tell a message to cells in the body about, like, this is me, do not kill this cell, this is me, or this is a docking site for a particular protein to bind to. So that orientation of those is very important in the glycocalyx. When blood glucose levels go very high, you can start to add glucose molecules onto those branching chains or onto the proteins themselves, and so now the code has been disrupted. So now a cell might see that and say, hey, this is no longer self, and it causes an autoimmune disease. Or another protein can no longer identify its docking location, so it can't bind to the cell appropriately. Or it might cause other things to bind to it inappropriately, so it changes the signaling just on itself. So that's a big part of it. And then you have the glycation of proteins themselves within the body, and that can then cause an activation of a receptor that identifies these proteins, that it triggers inflammation on itself, and that's the RAGE receptor, the receptor for AGE.
Does that ever happen like acutely? Like, is there a situation where you consume, let's just go extreme scales, a pixie stick and whey protein powder or something, like two very fast absorbing, like you get these. Does it ever happen that fast, or is this much more like a
That's a good question. I would imagine that the rate is probably much slower because since it's non-enzymatic, it requires the functionalization of a glucose or its target. It's like organic chemistry question. Like it's just the amounts that are there is just it's random. There's like a random amount that will go through that process. So if it's the time interaction is a big part of it. So how long they interact will determine also not just the concentration. Concentration does a lot. So if you had them like sitting in a glass and they were there for a long time together, you might be able to cause a non-enzymatic reaction to occur. But during your blood glucose spikes up and then it goes back down. Like, is that long enough to cause that effect? Unlikely, I would think. Yeah.
I also wonder about someone that's like, Tour de France athlete that's like keeping their glucose high while they're riding for hours and hours and hours. It's like, okay, maybe that might be good for performance, but possibly
Could
still
be deleterious. Yeah.
Yeah, or at least, it's kind of funny because when you look at a lot of, and this is purely hypothetical, but you look at a lot of endurance athletes and a lot of them, that are feeling like, they age very fast, right? Like you see, we've talked about this in videos. Like you see that guy that's, I've been running my whole life. He's 60 years old. He looks like he's 80. It's like there's obviously this effect of like oxidative damage. But then I think about that too. Like with athletes, it's like, okay, even if you are independent of AMPK phosphorylation, it seems like there is probably it's not a good position to be in where you're keeping your glucose levels high all the time, even if it's for performance. So
yeah, I think there's probably some arterial stiffening that occurs from that as well. So that's probably some of the stuff you're talking about, like you seem like they're aging, or they sometimes have heart attacks and whatnot. It's not just the stress; it's probably some other metabolic stuff that's going on from having high glucose all the time.
Do AGEs, or are there RAGE receptors sort of in our vasculature as well?
Yeah, they're everywhere.
Yeah, so this is something that impacts, literally everything.
Yeah.
What about crossing the blood-brain barrier? Any evidence there?
I guess it would depend on the size of the protein, right? That just depends on which one it is there. I imagine that because there's a cutoff limit to like what can get across. Yeah. So I don't know. That's a good question.
So this kind of comes a full circle moment back to the chicken nuggets, right? So it's like, you think based on that study with kidney function, do you think it had more to do with the pure oxidation of the oils, or do you think there was this AGE effect, or was it both?
It's both, yeah. The oxidized lipids and the advanced glycation end products both have effects on kidney function. Yeah.
So in terms of, and they're both kind of working in that same avenue. Is it? So we talked a little bit about how like the oxidation could impact that, and then and I knew you touched on it briefly, but in the same way that sort of we've heard advanced glycation end products can affect liver metabolism and
potassium benefits.
I think most people know of the main benefits of potassium: supporting a healthy heart, supporting healthy blood sugars, help balancing out your fluids, things like that. But there's some unexpected, very interesting benefits of potassium I think you should know about. Well, out of all the minerals, potassium is needed in the largest quantity. You need 4,700 milligrams of potassium every single day. You don't even require a fraction of that quantity for other nutrients. So with potassium, it's unique in that you need a lot of it.
Dr. Natural Medicine. In this video, I'll be going through the top 10 potassium-rich foods you should be getting in your diet every single day.
So today we're going to talk about why your muscles need most of your potassium. Now, what's very unique about potassium is that it's one mineral that we need a tremendous amount of. We need 4,700 milligrams. And out of all the tissues in the body, 80% is needed by your muscles, mainly. The question is, why do we need so much, and why is it going to the muscles? But before I explain that, I need to explain something called the sodium-potassium pump. Okay? You have billions of these little pumps, and what they do is they keep potassium on the inside of the cell, and they keep sodium outside the cell. So that's their main purpose. And the reason for that is anytime you have two different minerals that are held apart like that by a pump and by a membrane, the cell wall, you create a battery, which is this. You have positive, negative, held apart, that flow of electrons, that current, generates a certain amount of energy that is stored in the battery. Well, your cells are mini batteries. In fact, your brain has about 80 billion mini battery cells. Potassium is needed as the raw material to make sure this pump works. In fact, 30% of all the energy that you have in your body is allocated to this one little pump. And because this pump allows 2 potassium in and 3 sodium out, and that difference creates a voltage. If we're talking about the muscle, we're talking about 90 millivolts. In a nerve, it's about 70 millivolts. In the skin, it's about 50 millivolts. The voltage is just the power of this battery created by the difference between these 2 minerals held apart. And another term for that is called membrane potential, because when it's at rest, it's like a battery, but then it gets activated and it starts releasing this electrical charge that then causes the muscle to contract. And it creates nerve impulses, and it causes glands to secrete, like hormones or even like sweat glands. The same principle happens in a thunderstorm, where you have these clouds that have a positive charge and the earth is negative. And when those clouds start building up moisture at a certain humidity, you start generating a tremendous amount of electrostatic energy. And when that electrical field gets to a certain point, it'll discharge the energy as a thunderbolt, giving off 3 million volts per meter. So that's a tremendous amount of energy that is discharged. The same thing in the cell. You have the cell wall. On the outside you have positive, the inside you have negative, and you have a very, very thin membrane, okay? It's like 5 nanometers. Of course, this is a very large distance right here. This is very, very tiny, but the cell wall or membrane is 2 layers of lipids or fats that keep these 2 minerals apart. And once the muscle is activated to contract, or the nerve is activated to send an impulse, you lose potassium. The more exercise you're doing, the more you're sweating, the more you're losing these electrolytes. If you're injured or go through surgery or trauma, you will lose potassium. When the thyroid works, it's a gland, you'll lose more potassium. And also when you consume more refined sugar, you will also lose potassium as well. The other question is, are we losing as much sodium? No, not necessarily, because sodium has a tendency to be retained in the body, but we do lose way more potassium, and this is why this is a requirement right here. As far as the sodium requirement, it's about half what we need as far as potassium. When you do fasting, your body will have a tendency to retain more potassium just as a survival mechanism. So that's one of the biggest reasons why we have most of our potassium, 80%, in the muscles. And then when our potassium becomes low, the muscles become weak, you get tired, you don't have the endurance anymore, especially when you exercise, and your muscles start to cramp. Now, if you haven't seen my other videos on potassium, I put them up right here. Check it out. want to talk about why potassium makes you energetic and why, if you're deficient, you become fatigued. Now, this topic is quite fascinating because it relates to a pump in all of your cells of the body called the sodium potassium pump. And I'm going to dive in a little bit just to explain what that is and why that is so significant. It has to do with this. Out of all the energy that your body uses to digest, to grow hair, to create motion with muscles, and the energy it takes to run all the enzymes, this little sodium pump takes the lion's share of energy. Nearly 30% of all the energy that is utilized from your body, from the food that you consume, is allocated to this one little pump. Of course, these pumps are in all the cells, but it's interesting that your body is giving that much energy to this one specific function. And many people don't really even know what it is. They've never even heard about it before. Now, the definition of the word pump is slightly different than the sump pump that you have in your basement. It's a biological definition. The definition of this pump is a mechanism for the movement of electrolytes through the cell membrane. So you have this membrane, this cell wall, which is very, very thin. It's like 2 molecules thick. And electrolytes are electrically charged chemicals, or in this case, electrically charged minerals. And we're talking about sodium and potassium. Very simply, the main goal of this pump is to keep sodium going out, potassium going in. In other words, to keep the potassium inside the cell and keep the sodium outside the cell. That's its goal. Now, when you have different concentrations of electrically charged minerals inside the cell versus outside the cell, you basically create a battery, okay? So the purpose of the sodium-potassium pump is to maintain electrical charge so that cell can act as a battery. All right, so now the question is, what is the significance of having your cell maintain electrical charge? What is it actually doing? And that's going to be the next topic. It has everything to do with 4 things, primarily. There's other things, but the 4 primary functions are this: to support neurons in helping the nerves transmit signals, okay, communication through the body. And I'm talking about all the nerves, including nerves in your brain, the central nervous system. Also, to work with calcium to help the muscles contract and relax. So we have nerve and we have muscle function. Also, to help the cell establish the correct pH and help maintain fluid control. As you know, if there's a problem with sodium, for example, if you're retaining too much sodium, the cells are going to swell too much, right? So the balance of potassium and sodium is very, very important and to maintain the proper volume of fluid through the body. Now, here's what happens when you're low in potassium. And by the way, you also need sodium for this pump to work too, but you need 4 times as much potassium than sodium. And if we look at sodium versus potassium, more people are deficient in potassium than they are sodium. So what happens when you're low in potassium? Well, the nerves suffer. You start getting brain fog. Why? Because we're talking about the nerves in your brain. Also, you can get slow reflexes, tingling in the nerves, numbness in the nerves, abnormal heart rhythm, because the sodium-potassium pump is located in the pacemaker of the heart, which controls the rhythm of the heart. So it affects the brain, has a brain fog, or you're going to have motor nerve problems to the muscle, which could affect the ability to move and actually maintain a certain motion for a period of time. So you might get tired a lot faster because you just don't have the sodium-potassium pump working effectively throughout the entire body. All right, number 2 has to do with the ability for the muscles to contract and relax. That can show up in cramps. That can show up in fatigue, as in muscle fatigue. It can show up in muscle aches, muscle stiffness, tremors, constipation, because your colon is actually smooth muscle, and that could be a problem. Weakness in general, and high blood pressure, because your arteries have a certain type of muscle that can be dysfunctional. All right, and then we have pH. If you're deficient in potassium, the body has a tendency to be more acid. And then fluid control. If there's a potassium deficiency, you can get swelling of the body. I mean, how many people have way too much sodium versus potassium and their ankles are just swollen? When you consume foods higher in potassium, swelling goes away. So I just want to show you the connection between what this sodium potassium pump controls and the effects that it can create if you're missing the actual raw material that makes up that pump. Now let's go into this last part right here. How do people become deficient in potassium? Dietary, they don't consume enough foods high in potassium. The foods that have the most potassium would be leafy greens or avocados. So people just don't consume enough. You would have to consume 7 to 10 cups of salad or vegetables to get close to your RDAs, which is 4,700. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because potassium is the hardest to get. It's very easy to consume sodium, but it's not as easy to get potassium from your diet. Okay, if you're on diuretics, that could cause a potassium deficiency. Vomiting, diarrhea can deplete you of potassium. If you're a diabetic and you have high insulin, that can create a potassium deficiency. If you consume sugar or you're doing a high-carb diet, that will deplete potassium as well. The more stress you go through, the more injury you have, the more trauma, the more the body will dump potassium. And lastly, I wanted to talk about this one last thing, keto. What? That's right. Going on a ketogenic diet can cause your body to require more potassium. Why? Because when you go on a ketogenic diet and you lower your carbs and you don't need the quantity of stored sugar anymore, sugar actually stores water or fluid. So one sugar molecule will store almost 3 molecules of water. So basically, the more sugar you consume, the more glycogen you have, the more fluid that you're retaining, like you're a sponge of fluid. So when we cut down the carbs, you lose the fluid. And because these two minerals, sodium and potassium, work together, you're going to lose not just sodium, but you're going to lose potassium. You're going to end up with a lower amount of potassium. If you're already deficient in potassium, you're going to be even more deficient. And this is why people get the keto fatigue. This is why they might get cramps. This is why they might get side effects when they go on a ketogenic diet. But not if they're doing the healthy version of keto that I recommend, which is basically consuming foods that give you more of the nutrients that you need. Potassium is important, the B vitamins, a little bit more sea salt would be very beneficial. So if you started the ketogenic diet and you feel tired and you feel weak, all you have to do is beef up, no pun intended, the potassium and some sodium, and that should go away pretty quick. All right, so that was a very long explanation of why potassium makes you energetic, but I think it was important, and I think it's actually incredibly interesting. So thanks for watching. So if you want more knowledge on how to create a healthy body, subscribe now and get daily notifications. Hey guys, Dr. Berg here. Now I want to do a video on the most important electrolyte. Now let me explain what electrolyte is. If you ever take salt and put it in water and dissolve it, it disassociates. The sodium and chloride disconnect, and they become two separate minerals, okay? And that fluid is very electrically conductive. So basically electrolytes have to do with minerals that help conduct electricity in the body. So they help with a lot of different things. And so as far as electrolytes, it would be like potassium, sodium, magnesium, calcium, chlorides, all those minerals, okay? Now, potassium, out of all of the electrolytes, is the one that we need in very large quantities. And I was curious, why is that? Why do we need potassium in such large amounts? I'm talking 4,700 milligrams to 6,000 milligrams every single day. That's equivalent to 7 to 10 plus cups of salad or vegetable every single day. That's a lot. That's odd to me, and no one consumes that much. But let's go dig further on exactly why we need potassium. There's something in the body called the sodium potassium pump, okay? And it's built in a little protein connected to an enzyme. It forms a whole enzyme on the surface of your cells. And you have between 800,000 to 30 million of these little tiny pumps. And they're little generators that generate electricity to allow things to go through the cell. So they take a lot of energy to work. In fact, 1/3 of all the food that you eat, the energy of 1/3 of your diet goes to running those pumps, okay? You also have another pump in the stomach called the hydrogen potassium ATPase. Don't worry about the name. It's basically another a pump that's filled with potassium that allows you to create stomach acid to help you digest. These pumps also are in the muscles. They're in the nervous system. And the pumps in the nervous system use about 60% of your body's caloric intake of energy. So in other words, these pumps are really critically important in exchanging nutrition, glucose, amino acids, and other minerals to allow them to transport in and out of the cell. So potassium is essential for building the pumps to allow these functions right here. They charge the cell electrically, so your cells have certain voltage that allows things to work and go in and out of the cell and create different energy. In fact, your energy that you have that controls your metabolism is controlled partly by this little pump. So it charges the cell electrically. It gives you energy. It helps the muscles contract and relax because it allows calcium to go into the cell as well. So it controls the transport of calcium. Wow, interesting. So if you're low on something in this pump, and these pumps aren't working, your calcium is not going to relax the muscle, so you'll get muscle cramps, okay, from potassium. But it's really calcium. But we can't fix it by giving you calcium. We have to give you potassium. I'll get more into that. So the muscle needs this pump. The nerves, to conduct electricity, need this pump desperately. And fluid, the transport of fluid, the hydration of your body is controlled by this pump. And your overall physical energy, okay? Now, since potassium is so hard to get in the diet because people don't realize how much they need and they're not eating enough vegetables, you can experience a set of symptoms that I'm going to describe to you. You might have some of these. Number one, fatigue. Fatigue can come from a potassium deficiency because if you don't have enough potassium, your cells electrically are going to be way down. You can't pump anymore. And that's why when people start eating more potassium foods, it has more energy. The problem is, if you try to take a potassium pill, it only is comprising about 40 milligrams, maybe 90 milligrams. You need 4,700 milligrams. So you'd have to have a whole bottle. The pills are not going to work. And plus, if you took that much potassium without the other minerals, you could throw it out of balance. So you want to get your potassium from food or food concentrates. So then we have energy fatigue, we have muscle fatigue. So if you go up a flight of stairs and you feel like your legs are really heavy or you don't have the endurance, that is a potassium deficiency. Nerve. If the nerve is tired, your electrical impulses won't work. So you have arrhythmias, you'll have an alteration in heartbeat problems, skip beats, atrial fib. That's electrolyte deficiency. Okay? Fluid retention, swollen ankles. That's a potassium deficiency. What do doctors do? They tell you to avoid salt. Big mistake. You should increase potassium. Okay? And then overall, just energy in the cell to work correctly. Okay? Now, in the stomach, if you don't have enough potassium, you can't create the acid that you need to help digest protein and absorb other minerals. So again, the potassium is needed for the stomach, the nerves, the muscles, for energy, for fluid, for hydration, all these things, okay? So now that you know that, let's talk about how you become deficient. Number one reason is you don't have enough potassium in the diet. You need to consume 7 to 10 cups of vegetable or salad a day to achieve this. Now, I enhance this with food concentrates a lot of times if I can't get the quantity. And I use my wheatgrass juice powder. I take a teaspoon of that, and that will give me a blend of a lot of potassium and magnesium and a lot of other things to be able to spike that sodium-potassium pump to boost my energy as well. Vomiting, diarrhea will also create a deficiency. Surgery. When you get a surgery, what happens is your potassium just dumps because of the stress. And that's why they always give you a potassium IV, because to replenish that potassium. Stress will also decrease potassium. So let me just grab this book right here. My favorite SIBA, Encyclopedia for Endocrinology. We got right here, adrenal stress, right here, creates potassium loss. So with stress, creates a loss of potassium through the urine, okay? So sugar creates a deficiency of potassium. Why? Because insulin is the hormone that helps you absorb nutrients, right? Now, it also causes everything to go in the fat, and if you have a problem with insulin, like insulin resistance, you can't pull glucose into the cell, and that's why you're craving sweets, by the way. But see, what insulin does, it only acts as a trigger for the sodium-potassium pump to trigger the absorption of nutrients. So that doesn't get triggered, so you can't absorb things. So by taking more potassium, you can actually decrease the need for insulin. And that's what I recommend for my diabetics. It's very difficult to fix diabetes without enough potassium, okay, without enough vegetable. So if you have a lot of sugar, that'll deplete potassium. If you take potassium, it'll help with cravings and decrease your need for insulin. Diuretics, like blood pressure. If you're low in potassium, your blood pressure will go up. And you also have problems with calcium not moving in the correct places. So that's why the doctors give you a diuretic to get rid of fluid, and they give you a calcium channel blocker for high blood pressure, but they don't recommend enough potassium. There's so many people that consume enough potassium and their blood pressure comes down. So diuretics will deplete your potassium. So they get rid of electrolytes, your blood pressure stays high. Salt. So sodium, potassium, they always work in a balance. The reason I'm not talking about salt is that your body will tend to conserve salt more than potassium, and also people have a lot of extra salt in their diet. Like naturally just eat more salt than potassium, so they're rarely deficient in salt. Okay? So salt, too much salt can deplete potassium. Alcohol will deplete potassium. And the last one is ketogenic diets, which is interesting. So you go on a higher fat, low carb diet, what happens, you will deplete potassium. Thus, the reason why I tell you to consume more vegetable when you do a high fat diet, so you can replenish the potassium and feel fine, because a lot of times you'll dump a lot of water from losing a lot of fat as well when you're burning fat, or you might feel fatigued, or you might feel kind of like constipated. By adding more potassium from the vegetable, it's not the fiber, it's potassium in that food that will help flush you out and keep the liver clean and help these pumps work a lot better. So I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of the most important electrolyte, what it does in your body. Okay, that's what electrolytes do. And then also how you become deficient and what you need to do to correct this, okay? Hope this helped, and I will see you in the next video. Okay, we're going to talk about a very important mineral, potassium. Okay, why is it so important? Well, number one, because we need so much of it. Out of all the nutrients, vitamin A, vitamin B, calcium, magnesium, potassium, being a mineral, is needed in large amounts. I'm talking 4,700 milligrams. Okay, because it's used in all the cellular reactions. It's also used to store your sugar in your liver and your muscle. Now let's explain what I mean by that. Stored sugar is a good thing. We need to store some sugar to be able to handle a quick release of energy. And glucose, being the molecule of sugar, if you stick them together in a group, they're called glycogen. So glycogen is the storage of glucose, mainly in the liver, mainly in the muscles, and it's used like, it's very instant, so you can regulate that. So we need that. It just so happens potassium is the mineral that allows glucose to be stored as glycogen. So for every glucose molecule, you need one potassium molecule or element. So that's one thing. Okay? So let's say you're deficient in potassium. That means you're not going to store the glucose as well. So if you don't store glucose, your body then stores more fat. Yeah. So that's interesting. So a couple other points. Where do you get your potassium? Mainly from vegetables, but you can even get it from animal proteins as well. But, like the greens, the leafy greens, beet tops are really high. Avocados are very, very large amounts in avocados. So how do we know we're getting enough potassium? Well, 1 cup of greens, vegetable, or salads, on average, equal 1 ounce. Okay, 1 cup equals 1 ounce, and you need 4,700. So you're gonna need about between 8 and 10 ounces, or 7 to 10 cups. Okay, or 7 to 10 ounces. That would be like one of those salad containers or bags of salad that you see at the grocery store. You just need one of those per day. It's not too much, right? When you take a cup of salad, I'm not talking about like pack it down extremely tight. Just kind of like put it in there, like a good handful. That's like 1 cup or 1 ounce. You need at least 7 up to 10. I consume more than that. I consume probably 20. So it doesn't hurt if you have more, because the kidneys will also get rid of anything that's too much, especially when it comes down to potassium. A lot of people supplement potassium because it's hard to get the potassium, and they get it straight into the body. And also, in certain conditions, you need more potassium to improve these conditions. One is rheumatoid arthritis, big time. You go up into the 6,000, 7,000 milligrams, you can really put those symptoms in remission. Another one is diabetes or insulin resistance. Why? Because insulin does control. It's like the door that allows potassium to go in the cell. So insulin controls the level of potassium. And when you have insulin resistance, you can't pull that potassium in the cell. So if you don't pull potassium in the cell, you have a lot of problems. To make a long story short, and make it really simple, if you increase more potassium in the diet, you decrease the stress on the insulin dysfunction, you decrease the need for insulin. So having a little more will actually help insulin resistance and diabetes. Okay? So they both work kind of like a teeter-totter. If you have enough potassium, you won't have sugar cravings. Why? Because you're going to store the sugar, and you're going to have better blood sugar levels, because potassium stabilizes blood sugars, so you don't have this dip down. So potassium helps blood sugars, insulin dysfunction, and cravings for sweets. If you crave for sweet, we know you're potassium deficient, so we need more potassium. When I consume a meal, I always have the vegetable first, not at the end of the meal. Why? Because I've experimented. If I do the protein first, I tend to will keep eating more and more protein. There's like no turn-off switch. Versus the vegetable first, which gives me the potassium, and it kind of turns off that hunger, and I don't eat as much protein. My son, for example, he'll sit down and eat chicken wings. He can eat, I'm talking like massive quantities. So I get him to have the vegetable first, and then he doesn't need as much protein. because we just need like 3 to 6 ounces. So I always have the vegetable first for that reason. When you consume potassium, you help you balance the sodium. Okay, so we need this potassium-sodium ratio. So we need 4 times as much potassium as sodium. And that's why we need this. Most people have way too much sodium and not enough potassium. So they're going to retain fluid. When you have low potassium, you retain fluid, and you're salt sensitive, high blood pressure. If you take potassium, your blood pressure comes right down. It probably is, in many cases, the cause of high blood pressure, low potassium. Now, as you do a ketogenic diet, that's real low carbs. It's low carbs, and you're going to dump a lot of fluid. Because one thing is that carbs, especially refined carbohydrates, sugars, cause retention of fluid. Okay? Because when you consume carbohydrate, you also deplete your potassium. So when you have like cakes and cookies and sugar and donuts and breads and pasta, you're automatically depleting the potassium. Now, why is that? Well, because in nature, sugar cane is probably one of the highest things with potassium that you can consume. Not one of the highest, but it's very, very high. Okay, so there's a lot of potassium in sugar cane. But what they do is they refine it and they get rid of the potassium and other minerals like iron into molasses, and they put as white refined sugar and brown sugar as a really depleted potassium deficient sweetener. When you consume this refined sweetener over here without the mineral, you tend to, your body almost like starts deplete. It's a potassium depleter. It's almost like your body will start trying to recombine that glucose with sugar and starts pulling from reserves. So in other words, to make a long story short, when you consume sugar, I'm trying to make this really simple. You consume refined sugar, junk food, you're depleting your potassium, and you're increasing your sodium, and you're increasing your fluid retention. So when we cut that out, you dump a lot of fluid, because you can drop a lot of weight in 1 week. So you have the volume of fluid, not just water. You need the electrolytes, okay, that help the connectivity. So when people do the ketogenic diet, they feel really tired.
Okay. Alright, I think I'm good now. Had a kind of a screw up earlier. Probably it's because I don't know, there was a couple of things I had to do just now, so I had to just do it all over. I had to make a few changes. Alright. Let me, okay. Since I just felt like hopping online real quick. Alright, let me share this.
This isn't going to be a positive video, but I'd really appreciate if you guys hung around, as I want to be upfront and honest about a mistake I've made.
Me swear was the first draft. Me no did steroids. Me do did nothing wrong. Me 100% natural. 120 kilograms. Deadlift 939. Bench press 485. Squats 700 plus. Natural. Coach Reagan, in today's video, a natty or not on none other than the famous powerlifter Nanjo Chinye, who goes by nanjo.fitness on Instagram. This guy received an 18-month ban from powerlifting in the IPF that goes by WADA, World Anti-Doping Agency, and he's been banned for 18 months. And so you're thinking, well, if he's been banned, why am I doing a natty or not? Clearly, he's on steroids. But here's the catch. He says that he's natural. And so let's see what he says. I'm going to explain what's going on. Let's get right into it.
This isn't going to be a positive video, but I'd really appreciate if you guys hung around, as I want to be upfront and honest about a mistake I've made.
Me swear was the first draft. Me no did steroids. Me do did nothing wrong. Me 100% natural. 120 kilograms. Deadlift 939. Bench press 485. Squats 700 plus. Natural.
I'm suspended from competing in the IPF for 18 months. I want to preface this by saying I'm clean. I've always been a clean athlete.
Of course he's going to say that he's natural. I mean, why wouldn't he? His sponsors, for example, Gymshark and others, would they want to know that he's perhaps using performance-enhancing drugs to achieve those monumental lifts?
And this is a mistake made through administrative negligence.
Already deflecting. If it was just one mistake, you wouldn't currently ban. It takes 3 administrative negligence mistakes, which could be done on purpose, very easily. If someone were coaching this man and saying, how could you get away with taking steroids and not actually get caught failing a drug test? Well, they could take notes on this video.
Due to competing at the highest level in powerlifting, I was emailed to join the Adams list. This is essentially a list where you agree to be randomly drug tested at 1 hour at any point during the day.
You don't just...
Get ready for the next battle. Round 1. Fight.
최강원사님, 제가 다른 여자랑 얘기할까봐 걱정이 돼서 보는 거예요? 그럼 빨리 저랑 사귀던가. 아, 일도 안 하고 있구나. 아, 복잡하네. 일빨랑 해야 되는데 내 손이 안 나와주고 있어서. 아, 배부르다.
Get ready for the next battle.
Agree to it, you have to, you can't compete. At the top, people know that there are in fact people taking steroids. If you can't get tested at any time without knowing in advance of those drug tests, you can very easily pass. If you only got tested at the World Powerlifting Championships, you could take testosterone suspension for 50 weeks straight, 500 milligrams a week. You could perhaps put on 20, 30 pounds, who knows. 2 weeks before the test, you stop taking the testosterone. And by the competition, you would pass that drug test. Now, would you pass blood work? No. That is why I ask people to send me their blood work. Simply passing a drug test when you know in advance about that drug test, it doesn't prove that you're natural. And so unless you're randomly tested, it is very easy to pass, and you could very easily be abusing substances leading up to that competition, as you all know.
Through negligence on my own end, I didn't see this email and I didn't respond to it, and that counts as a strike.
It's possible that he didn't see the message. You know, I just don't read my emails. I don't go on social media. I don't post on Instagram. I don't go on YouTube ever. I mean, I'm just one of those people that I stay off grid. Man has nearly 200,000 followers on Instagram. He makes a living from doing social media. What are the odds that he's just not going to see an important message from his powerlifting federation? It's possible. It's also possible that he's thinking, holy shit, I'm on performance enhancing drugs right now. They're asking me to do these things to get tested. And so if I respond to this message and they ask to test me, then I'm fucked. Let's just not respond. I mean, after all, if they don't come see me, if they don't test me, well, I'm clearly innocent, right? It's kind of like when you did something wrong and somebody sues you and they walk up to you, they knock on the door, and eventually you've been served. And so for months, you've been evading them. If athletes could just all use the excuse, oh, I didn't get the email, I didn't get that phone call, when would they ever be served? And so it's possible, but they don't give a shit. The IPF, they don't care. And so that's one strike. 3 strikes, and you're out.
I was then emailed again to join the list and fill in my information. I filled in information, but I did it incorrectly, which caused a second strike.
You finally went and filled out the information, but you did it incorrectly. And what could that be? Well, you write the wrong address. And so, for example, if you say you live in room 272, but you're in room 262, how could they come and test you? You're not in that room. If you say you're training at Blue Lobster Fitness Gym, but you're training at Seagull Bar Gym, well, they would show up to that gym and you wouldn't be there. And so you kind of got to fill out the form correctly. It doesn't look good if you don't know how to do things correctly. You ask questions. You say, hey, is this done appropriately? This is now 2 strikes. 1 strike, it could have been a mistake. 2, well, it's certainly possible. But remember, it's not until 3 strikes that you're out.
I was then emailed again.
What the fuck? I've heard this 16 times. I was emailed again, emailed again, emailed again. Email. I'm hoping it's email. I'm hoping it's not emailed means some kind of other thing. Maybe there's a new technology you're emailed.
They then came to test me at my uni accommodation, and due to the way my uni accommodation is set up, you need a key in order to enter.
What
As they weren't
the
able to
fuck?
enter, this counted as a 3rd strike.
When you fill out these forms, let me make it clear. They ask for everything that you would need to say in order for them to test you. You can't just say, oh, I forgot that you needed the passcode to get in. Oopsie, bro, it isn't like writing your first draft. This is not an excuse. And so perhaps he lives in a dorm room, a building, a residence, a hotel, a motel. In any regards, you have to say exactly how they can get in there to test you. And so imagine, it's important, it's imperative. Your career is on the line. And you just say, yeah, I'm in room 272. You just show up and I'm good. Meanwhile, you need a key to get in the front door. Didn't mention that. Bro, becoming Mr. Mike wasn't on my 2026 bingo card.
The consequence of 3 strikes is usually a 2-year suspension. But due to me explaining context to the IPF, They thankfully have reduced this to 18 months.
He says that because he wants you to believe that the IPF felt sorry for his clerical errors, that he probably is natural, and they felt guilty, but they hell had to give him the suspension. But it's only 18 months, which means he's probably innocent. That is why he's saying that. Do you understand this? He's not saying, I take full responsibility. 3 clerical errors in a row, 3 strikes, and you're out. I was served with an 18-month sentence, and deservedly so. And so, of course, many of you are wondering, am I in fact natural? The answer is yes. Here's the proof. Here is my blood work. Now, I know that many of you are not going to believe me. I mean, after all, I did fail to show up to these tests. But this blood work shows my FSH, my LH, my testosterone, my cholesterol, everything. You can send it to Coach Greg, send it to Derek. Derek doesn't do these things. You can send it to Coach Greg, and he will make a video verifying if I was in fact natty or not. Instead of that, no blood work, just trust me, bro. And so do you see why I'm so suspicious? I'm watching the way he's answering these questions, and I'm picturing exactly what he's doing. He knows that an appeal to sympathy can easily work. Trust me, I'm natural. It's so very sad.
I'm truly sorry, and I'm really disappointed in myself. And I recognize that I've let both myself and you guys down.
That sentence is actually good. I'm truly sorry I've let you guys as well as myself down. I like this sentence. He should have stuck with that. He didn't need some of this other rhetoric that was being spewed. But let's move on.
I've not held myself to the highest standard as an elite level athlete.
Correct, especially after 2 strikes. You ensure that everything is done right. You literally would call them and say, look, I know I have 2 strikes. Can you please test me right now? Can I get my blood work done? Is there anything extra I can do? I will drive to your office right now. Where do you want me to be tested? And I want to be tested more than just once. I'm 100% natural. Please test me more than everyone else. Can I pay to get drug tested? At any time, please test me. My audience doesn't believe me. I'm truly natural. Please test me. That's what I would do.
I'm using this 18-month suspension as a time to both learn and grow.
I'm using this 18-month suspension as a time to get turkey and swole. You know, for 18 months now, I can't compete, and so all I can do is train. This would be a great time to take even more. Maybe it's possible. Is it possible that that's what's going on? Or is it possible that the entire time he knew there was a 3 strike rule, he could have been thinking, I'm not going any competitions right now. It's the off season. And so I'm going to blast hella gear. I'm going to get that deadlift to over 1,000 pounds. I'm going to put on so much muscle. I'm going to change my muscle nuclei so that I'll have a competitive advantage in the future when I actually hop off. Until those 3 strikes happen, he can take whatever he wants. They write him the message, we need to test you. I didn't see the message. You then double your doses yet again. You continue to train. You then send him the information, but you do it wrong. Again, double your doses. And when they do lock it down, give them the wrong address. And so what typically happens is this happens in several sports, including cycling. What athletes will do is they'll fail to tell them about the vacation that they're going on. You know, you're going to 2 weeks vacation in the Maldives or perhaps in Mexico, wherever. And so for 2 weeks, you can use EPO, test suspension, you name it. And if they come knocking at your door, hey, it's a strike. I wasn't there. I was on vacation. When they say, what time do you go to the gym? Oh, I'm at this gym from 4 till 6. And you, in fact, are training in the morning. And so when they go to test you at the gym, you're not there. They call you. Hey, you weren't at the gym. You're supposed to be there. It's on your locator form. Where are you? I didn't look at my phone. I missed a message. I'm sorry. It's 1 strike. And so you can see how people can deliberately take advantage of these 3 strikes in order to get away with taking substances. You might be thinking, oh, they can just use Tren and so on. No, they're not going to use Tren because Tren stays in your system too long. But there are substances you could take, for example, test suspension that clears your system very, very fast. And so if you're an intelligent athlete, a power lifter, and you want to evade a drug test, and you want to go and abuse the 3 strike and you're out system, then you absolutely can. People do this and they exploit it on purpose. And so that is why, even if you haven't failed a drug test, he hasn't failed a drug test. We don't know for sure if he's taking steroids, SARMs, you name it. And so he has what's called plausible deniability. Hence, he's only got an 18-month suspension. What they should be doing is continuing to test him for the rest of the 18 months, perhaps every single month, or he should be going out of his way to not only show that he's natural, but to prove it. If I ever fail a test, do like Hussein Farhat, you get $1 million. Come test me at any time. If he did that, got his blood work done at multiple times, and in particular, if he continued to lift at an exceedingly high rate, for example, he sets a PR closely after getting his blood work taken, or he sets a PR and the day after gets his blood work, that would almost assure that bro is 100% natural. And so if he wants to prove to the world that he's natural, he needs to set a PR, get his blood work, and send it to me. Now, it doesn't have to be me. It can, of course, be other people. But this is what he needs to do in order to get back his credibility.
There's so many more aspects that I didn't consider, and through negligence of my own, have landed me in this situation.
Thankfully, he says, through negligence of my own. These are more powerful words. And so 3/4 of this apology is good. About 1/4 is deflecting and placing blame on other people. I do believe he's doing that because he's wanting to convince you that he's 100% natural, even if he isn't. Do I know if he's 100% natural or if he isn't? I do not. He has plausible deniability. Now, if he does want to have us believe him, he's going to have to continue to set these records, and he's going to have to get drug tested more than anyone else. He has been red flagged. If you just believe that he's natural because you're a friend of him, or that you like him, or he's a nice guy, then you're just an idiot. Just because he's friendly and or nice, or you like him, it doesn't mean that he's natural. And so if you want to compare his lifts, I believe it's 938-pound deadlift. Natural, okay, guys? In comparison, Thor, not natural. Eddie Hall, not natural. They only lift 150, perhaps a little bit more than that. And so if he's actually natural and used performance-enhancing drugs, would he deadlift 1,200? What would he be lifting? And so the fact that he claims to be natural, it's highly suspicious because his lifts are so exceedingly strong. It doesn't guarantee that he's natural, nor does it guarantee that he's enhanced. However, 3 strikes and you're out. In the eyes of IPF, it's the same thing as failing a drug test. Trent and Jerry's over here. Hot take. Powerlifters claiming natural yet are doing supernatural feats of strength is equally as destructive and deceptive as bodybuilders who claim natural but are on performance-enhancing drugs. Fail drug test? X. Avoid drug test? Check. Did he fail the drug test? No. He simply avoided it. And so perhaps he has the hack. Anyone defending this in the IPF should also be tested immediately. Picture this.
Yeah, good shot.
Get ready for the next battle.
Okay, so we've already talked about the preliminaries that are here. Because every 9 seconds in the U.S., a woman is assaulted or beaten. Around the world, at least 1 in every 3 women has been beaten, coerced into sex, or otherwise abused for a lifetime. Most often, the abuser is a member of our own family. Domestic violence is the leading cause of injury to women. More than car accidents, money, and rape combined. Studies suggest that up to 10 million children witness some form of violence. Nearly 1 in 5 teenage girls who have been in a relationship said Many children experience emotional and psychological effects due to domestic violence, and domestic violence can lead to increased risk of behavioral issues in children, and support services are crucial for helping affected children to recover and thrive. I am proud to stand here with GUN as they announce the awarding of grant funding to nonprofits serving the Shreveport community. These grants reflect their ongoing commitment to strengthen